Michael Kohberger, in reference to Bryan Kohberger, Bryan Christopher Kohberger, Kohberger.
That's Bryan Kohberger's father in a voicemail after the murder of 4 University of Idaho students. It's one of a batch of new records from Washington State University, where Kohberger studied criminology. These records are giving us a look at what was going on at the school after the murders and after the arrests, and how cops actually spotted Kohberger's car weeks before his arrest. I'm Anjanette Levy, and this is Crime Fix. Before we get into this stuff about Bryan Kohberger, I want to tell you about this app that I like that I've been using. It's called Upside, and it will give you cash back on things that you buy all of the time, things like gas, groceries, and even carry out. Here's what you do. You download Upside for free. You claim an offer at one of their 100,000 plus locations. You pay like you usually do with your card, and then you verify the purchase. And you'll see the money you'll get back right in the app. So say I need to get gas or I want takeout one night. I'll search for Upside offers first. After I spend, money appears in my app that I can transfer straight into my bank. Upside's frequent users earn an average of $254 back a year. Who can beat that? To start getting your cash back, click the link in the description or scan the QR code that you see on your screen and use our promo code CRIMEFIX to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. On November 13th, 2022, a call to police in Moscow, Idaho changed everything. 4 University of Idaho students were found in a rental house on King Road, stabbed to death. It's the kind of crime that would shock people even in a big city. But this was Moscow, a college town, the kind of place where people didn't lock their doors. But that would change. Maddie Mogan, Kaylee Gonsalves, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle had been out to the big football game the day before, partying, hanging out, doing what college kids do. Hours later, they were dead, stabbed in their beds. Xana actually fought for her life. She was stabbed more than 40 times. The search was on for a murderer. Time was of the essence. Little did anyone know in those early days of the investigation that the killer was just miles away, studying at Washington State University across the state line in Pullman. His name, Bryan Kohberger. He was a PhD student in criminology, a teaching assistant no less, and he was walking the halls of WSU as if nothing had happened. Since December 2022, we have requested records from WSU a number of times, looking into Bryan Kohberger's time there and trying to figure out more about what he was doing and whether the school administration suspected anything at all. WSU gave us a new batch of records recently. Some of it contains items we hadn't seen before, like information about 2 officers spotting his white Elantra from a police bulletin just a couple of weeks after the murders. I'll get to that shortly. It seems like a major opportunity missed, but there were also internal discussions about the murders and concerns from parents of students that a killer was on the loose, and the university, as far as one parent was concerned, wasn't really communicating much about it. I'm going to get into all of this, but first, let's go back to the very beginning. It was November 13th, 2022, just before noon. A 911 call came in from roommates of Maddie, Kaylee, and Xana. A Moscow officer responded to the house on King Road.
What do you remember seeing? What started?
I remember I was in my room, and I was trying to go to bed, and I heard Kaylee, who, ex-girlfriend, who also has a dog Murphy.
Real fast, which one was your room?
Kaylee.
Which one is your room?
Oh.
What room are you in? You were in that room?
My room, not Xana's room. My room.
And your room is this one right here?
Next to the stairs. That one, Xana's room.
Second floor room.
Second floor.
Okay.
All I heard was I heard go upstairs. Like, okay, I'm gonna go to sleep now because she's going upstairs.
And you heard who go upstairs?
Kaylee and the dog Murphy.
And upstairs to the very top?
Yeah, that's where her room is.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden I heard her walking up, I heard her scream, and she ran downstairs because she saw someone. That's what I'm pretty sure she said. Someone's here, and she screamed and just ran downstairs. And I called for her name, but I jumped up and locked my door because I was so scared. And I heard someone in the bathroom, and I heard her crying, and I heard some guy say that you're going to be okay, I'm going to help you. And I kept calling her name, but she wasn't answering. And then I opened the door for a second, and I saw this guy, and he was not insanely tall, but he was wearing all black and like this mask that was just covering his forehead and his mouth. And I locked the door, and I called, and I didn't know what to do.
This was at 4
4
this
a.m.,
morning?
yes.
Okay. All right, describe the guy that you saw.
I don't think he was a little bit taller than me, and I couldn't really see much of him, but I'm almost positive he was wearing a full black outfit, and he had this mask that was just over his forehead and over his mouth, and he didn't say anything to me, like, at all. I just shut the door and locked it, because I didn't know what to do, and I think he went out, like, the side door, the sliding door in the kitchen that goes out to the backyard.
Okay.
No one knew it at the time, but that person wearing all black would turn out to be Washington State University PhD student Bryan Kohberger. These selfies of him wearing all black were later extracted from his cell phone. Less than 3 hours after finding out about the homicides, WSU's police chief Gary Jenkins was in touch with Moscow's police chief. Jenkins wrote in a text, "I discovered I do not have Tyson's cell number, so if you or Tyson could give me a call, I would appreciate it." Tyson was one of the higher-ups in the department. Fry and Jenkins remained in contact throughout the investigation. By 3 p.m. that afternoon, Chief Jenkins was texting with someone at WSU about posting an alert to students and staff to notify them about the murders in Moscow. The text alert stated, "Moscow Police Department investigating homicide near University of Idaho campus, not aware of any threat to the WSU Pullman community." Now, that person, Jason Sampson, later questioned the information they were putting out to the WSU community. Just after 6 p.m. on November 13th, Sampson wrote to Chief Jenkins, "Both sites updated. Question, given what I have read, how come it is considered not an ongoing threat? Does that mean it doesn't appear random if we knew the evidence? Just curious." Chief Jenkins responded, "Yes, that's pretty much it." Sampson responded, "That was for personal knowledge. Didn't want details, just trying to understand logic in how we sent message." Chief Jenkins then wrote, "I don't know much myself. I have to rely on my contacts at Moscow PD to give me accurate information." While all of this is going on, Bryan Kohberger, we now know, had been to Costco and a grocery store that day. On November 16th, 3 days after the murders, Chief Jenkins wrote a letter to students and staff at WSU. It read, "To the Washington State University Pullman campus community, the deaths this past weekend of 4 University of Idaho students have shocked and saddened the WSU community. While the case is under active investigation by the Moscow Police Department, few details have been released about how and why it occurred and who committed these horrific acts. If there were any threat to the public, our department and the Moscow Police Department would proactively warn the public. However, I have been assured by the Moscow Police Department that, based on information from their preliminary investigation, investigators believe this was an isolated, targeted attack, and there is no imminent threat to the community at large." Now, this letter was 3 days into the investigation, and from my review of all the police reports, Moscow PD, they didn't have any suspects. They were investigating people, as any department would. There was only one real suspect they came up with, and that person was later eliminated through DNA testing. Meanwhile, the entire time, Bryan Kohberger was walking around WSU. And after Kohberger pleaded guilty and was sentenced, investigators said they could find no connection between him and any of the victims, and they still don't know why he targeted that house on King Road. 9 days after the murders, one concerned parent wrote to WSU with questions. The mother wrote, "I have 4 questions I am needing answers to as soon as possible as to make the best choice for the safety of our daughter. Number 1, what is WSU's prevention plan for WSU students? Number 2, what is the new safety plan for WSU outside of look up while walking and stay vigilant? Number 3, what options do students have with WSU to continue the semester if we feel it is unsafe for our student to be there? And number 4, how does WSU consider campus/Pullman safe when the police have been upfront that they cannot ensure anyone's safety up in the Palouse? Lastly, with this happening yesterday, it seems that the situation continues to decline in safety. What are WSU's thoughts?" As parents, we have not seen much communication from WSU. We do not feel a 5-minute, 5-mile difference between campuses makes one safe and the other not. The University of Idaho is releasing daily what they are doing for their students and families. We in Boise are being interviewed by the news on if we are going to let our kids go back. It's a hard decision to make when WSU is not supplying information. Thank you for taking the time to answer. I hope to hear from you before Saturday when our daughter is supposed to return. I appreciate your time and answering my questions. The email was forwarded to an administrator to handle, and that wasn't the only communication WSU received. Here's a voicemail.
My daughter's name is, I don't want her returning to Washington State University for the quarter semester because of the situation in Moscow. And can you please call me back? My name is, the suspect has not been apprehended, and my daughter is living in a rental house with 5 other girls. And what are our options for finishing the semester at home? I absolutely don't feel safe, and I would like to go with her, but I can't. I really need your help, and this is the only number I can think of. Thank you so much, and please call me back.
Now, we don't know the date that voicemail was left, but it had to be before Christmas break. By late November, police had a lead, video of a white car driving around the King Road neighborhood at the time of the murders. The FBI identified it as a white Hyundai Elantra between the years of 2011 and 2013. In fact, 2 weeks after the murders, this bolo went out to WSU police, Moscow PD, and Pullman PD, asking officers to look for that white Hyundai Elantra. It was marked law enforcement sensitive, do not distribute, and do not stop the vehicle or make contact with the driver. Moscow police didn't release that information to the public until December 6th. They did, however, send it out to those law enforcement agencies as a confidential bolo, saying, call us if you see this. These records from WSU show the university had Bryan Kohberger's vehicle information on file. In fact, within hours of receiving that bolo, 2 WSU officers had searched for it. After Kohberger's arrest, Moscow Police Corporal Brett Payne wrote in an affidavit, Washington State University police officer Daniel Tiengo queried white Elantras registered at WSU. As a result of that query, he located a 2015 white Elantra with a Pennsylvania license plate. This vehicle was registered to Bryan Kohberger. But there is something really peculiar about this, because not only did Tiengo search for this vehicle and find it, we know another officer actually drove to the apartment complex and put his eyes on the vehicle. He saw it, but neither called into the Moscow police to report it. I asked Chief Jenkins about this in July of 2025. Take a look. A bolo went out in November, a couple of weeks after the homicides, to law enforcement only. And there were a couple of Washington State University officers who actually noticed that there was a white Hyundai Elantra owned by Bryan Kohberger on campus. It was a different, year than they were looking for. But can you explain to me what happened with that? Because it's mentioned in the probable cause affidavit, but I feel like there's a lot of confusion about that because people think, oh, well, they were looking at him that early, but that's really not the case, I don't think, because they then made that a public bolo on December 7th.
Right. The bolo that we got was, I think, identical to the one that eventually went out to the public, but this was on November 28th. They sent a bolo out to the local law enforcement agencies with a vehicle of interest that they labeled as law enforcement sensitive, meaning that we should not share it beyond the law enforcement community. And the description of the vehicle was a white Hyundai Elantra with between the years of 2011 and 2013. And so one of our officers, within 16 hours of receiving that bolo, was checking our parking database that includes information about vehicles that have parking permits or that pay to park on campus. and found a white Hyundai Elantra that was with Pennsylvania plates registered to Bryan Kohberger, but it was a 2015. So the BOLA was very specific about the vehicle make, the vehicle model, and the vehicle year parameters and the color. So he didn't submit that as a tip. And then later, that was on graveyard shift. And then later on day shift, one of our officers was driving around and saw that same vehicle parked in graduate student housing. And again, it was not within the date parameters.
So those two officers didn't end up sending that information over to Moscow PD because of the date discrepancy or the model year discrepancy?
That's correct. Yeah, it was not sent over to their tip line.
So Officer Tiengo and Sergeant Whitman, they discovered a white Hyundai Elantra belonging to Kohberger on campus 2 weeks after the murders, and they didn't call it in. Had they called that into Moscow PD, it's possible that Kohberger could have been ID'd as a possible suspect much earlier than December 19th, when his name came back from the FBI's genetic genealogy testing. I asked Chris McDonough, host of the Interview Room, about this recently.
Well, I think you and I talked about it, Anjanette, on a previous show with you. That was, in my opinion, a huge investigative mistake, and it wasn't just a mistake in terms of we didn't call it over. Okay, the officers did their job. They found the car. They went to the car. Okay, somebody made a command decision that said, well, don't contact the owner of that car. And then they tied into that decision in my opinion, a nonsensical excuse for, well, it was the wrong year. Okay. Well, okay, then what did the BOL get correct? We're looking for a white Hyundai, okay, in the area, anything in the area, okay, around the potential time of the crime. We're to presuppose that Washington State University didn't also look for video about that car on the night of the crime in that email, okay? Mm-hmm. And so what's the chief doing, in my opinion? He knows they made not only a huge mistake, but they blew it, because they could have had, and I hate to say this about any law enforcement, I back the blue when we're right, and I also tell it when we're wrong. Okay, that's our responsibility to the public, and this chief owes it to the public and to the family to say, you know what? Not only did we make a mistake, you're right. We should have gone and knocked on that guy's door, who was registered to that vehicle, living in that apartment complex, because God forbid, after that night, if he would have killed somebody else, that chief would have been really in big trouble in the long run. And so somebody made a command decision that said, okay, you got the car, you got a car that matches. Yeah, is it white? Yeah, where is it? It's here. Okay, find out who owns it, interview that person, and send it to Moscow. That was the appropriate protocol.
We know that after the murders, that Bryan Kohberger was cleaning out his car meticulously, and it was torn apart by the FBI for processing, and they did not find any DNA belonging to the victims in it. So some precious time may have been lost there. After Kohberger's arrest on December 30th, 2022, Chief Jenkins sent an email out about the mention of the officers in the affidavit. The email states, the affidavit describes the great work Officer Tiengo and Sergeant Whitman did in tracking down a possible suspect vehicle, which was, as it turned out, the suspect vehicle. Note that the timeline for locating the vehicle is not entirely correct in the affidavit. The affidavit indicates that the area law enforcement agencies were asked to be on the lookout for the suspect vehicle on November 25th, when in fact they did not ask for that until the morning of November 28th. Shortly after receiving the email from Moscow PD, I sent out an email with the vehicle description on November 28th at 8:24 hours, and Tiengo queried Kohberger's license plate on November 29th at 00:28 hours, approximately 16 hours later, not 3 days. And Sergeant Whitman observed the vehicle at Kohberger's apartment complex at 00:58 hours on November 29th. Outstanding work. Jenkins then talks about how he's been partnering with all of these departments in the WSU community to work with students and staff to help them with anything they might need. He then writes, from the WSU PD perspective, we are offering reassurance that we are here for their safety, and we are here to help them with any perceived safety and threats or disruptions, including harassment from the press. As we move from 2022 to 2023, I ask that you all reflect back on this past year and remember the difficult times this department has endured, and then look at where we are now. You've all proven to be resilient and committed to your profession, to WSU, and to WSU PD. We should now all look to embrace opportunities that reframe how others view WSU PD. The difficulties in the past will not define us. It is the great work of Tiengo and Whitman that puts WSU PD in a favorable light on a national stage. It is the professional and disciplined work of the members of the regional SWAT team who did what needed to be done to save lives. Again, it's very possible that Kohberger could have been identified as a suspect in late November had those officers called in the information about the Elantra, despite the difference in the model year. Hours after Kohberger's arrest in Pennsylvania on December 30th, 2022, WSU's interim assistant vice president of student affairs wrote this letter to let Kohberger know that WSU was issuing an emergency suspension. Jennifer Hyatt wrote that she was imposing an emergency suspension because Kohberger had been charged with murdering Kaylee Gonsalves, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin, and had in fact been arrested earlier that morning. Hyatt said being charged with these crimes was certainly a violation of the standard of conduct for WSU students because the allegations involved abuse of others or disruption or interference with the university community and a violation of the law. Hyatt wrote that Kohberger had 10 days to challenge the decision, but we know that didn't happen because he was in jail. On that same date, and with that letter, Kohberger was notified that he was barred from returning to campus. Police Chief Jenkins wrote in a trespass admonition, "This admonition is to inform you that you have been trespassed from all areas of Washington State University campuses. This includes all buildings, sidewalks, breezeways, courtyards, access roads, and parking lots, and any other Washington State University campus property. This admonition is effective immediately and will continue until pending student conduct charges have been resolved and you have been given permission in writing to return to campus." Following Kohberger's arrest, his father, Michael, actually called the university asking about his son's apartment. Take a listen.
Michael Kohberger, in reference to Bryan Kohberger, Bryan Christopher Kohberger, Kohberger. Our home phone number here is, Bryan did reside at, what I'd like to know is about his apartment and the status. That's number one. Number two, if you cannot answer that question, I understand. If you could redirect us, Bryan's phone is not accessible. You cannot access it or his email.
Now, after the arrest, there was also concern that Bryan Kohberger might still have keys to buildings on campus. Chief Jenkins believed the keys were in Kohberger's apartment, and he was going to try to figure out the best way to get the keys back. A photo of the key Kohberger should have had was included in an email. The records from WSU also show an email that was sent to the school community in January 2023. It stated, "The last few months have been trying, and the announcement of the arrest of Bryan Christopher Kohberger, a former WSU PhD student, as a suspect in the deaths of 4 University of Idaho students has shocked our communities. First and foremost, I want to reiterate my heartfelt sympathies to the families and friends of Ethan, Kaylee, Madison, and Xana. The tremendous loss of these young lives has left all of us deeply saddened. I encourage all of our faculty, staff, and students to take advantage of the support resources available to you listed at the end of this email. If you have concerns about a student's well-being, please share the information with the Student Care Network. I am hopeful that the coming days and weeks will provide all of us with additional answers and information about the nature of this incident. Over the next few weeks, I anticipate that many members of our Cougar family particularly those familiar with Mr. Kohberger, may be contacted by law enforcement, the media, and concerned citizens. I strongly encourage everyone to cooperate with the investigative process as much as they are able. The email also encouraged tips and information to be shared with the Moscow Police Department. Police interviewed faculty, students, and staff at WSU who worked with Kohberger. They learned he spoke a lot about his field of study, sexual burglary. He also talked about Ted Bundy and said whoever committed the Moscow murders must have been pretty good. Investigative records showed WSU had received 13 complaints about Kohberger, making students feel uncomfortable, particularly women. The families of the 4 victims are now suing WSU for wrongful death. WSU has denied any wrongdoing in that lawsuit. Bryan Kohberger is serving 4 consecutive life sentences for the murders of Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana in Idaho's maximum security institution. That follows his guilty plea in July of 2025. And that does it for this episode of Crime Fix. I'm Anjanette Levy. Thanks so much for being with me. I'll see you back here next time.